Good morning, everybody. Have you ever wronged somebody or been wronged by somebody? Well, today's message is about God's way of righting wrongs. So let's make this next song our opening prayer.
Pray you'll be alright and watch us where we go and help us to be wise in times when we don't know. Let this be our prayer when we lose our way. Lead us to a place, guide us with your grace, to a place where we'll be safe.
I pray we'll find your love.
I pray we'll find your love
And hold it in our hearts.
and hold it in our hearts.
When stars go out each night.
When stars go out each night.
Remind us where you are. Let this be our prayer.
Let this be our prayer.
When shadows fill our day.
When shadows fill our day.
Lead us to a place, guide us with your grace, to a place where we'll be safe. A world where pain and sorrow will be ended, and every heart that's broken will be mended, and we'll remember we are all God's children, reaching out to touch you, reaching to the sky. We ask that life be kind and watch us from
Watch us
above.
from above.
We hope each soul will find another soul to love. Let this be our prayer. Just like every child.
Just like every child
Needs to find a place, guide us with your grace, give us faith so we'll be safe. Needs to find a place, guide us with your grace, give us faith so we'll be safe.
We are in chapter 6 of Paul's letter to the Corinthians, and he's challenging them throughout this entire letter to start getting along with each other. So how about us? My guess is that most of us would say that we are easy to get along with. And when there is tension with somebody, it's because it's the other person's fault, right? I see that in my marriage to Kathy. It's so obvious to me that when there's a problem between us, it's her fault. Solution to the problem right there. Blame is just something that is part of our nature. And if the conflict gets worse and someone feels wronged, it's natural to want to get even, settle the score. If we're hurt, we want to hurt back. So, in fact, conflict is really big business. When we see conflict, when you type in something on Twitter and you're critical and somebody's critical back, cha-ching, cha-ching, it's worth trillions of dollars. Conflict, being wronged and trying to get back at somebody, makes trillions of dollars for the internet. In Corinth, it went so far as Christians were angry at each other and they were taking their disputes to the Roman court instead of settling the disputes among themselves. So, in chapter 6, verse 1, the Apostle Paul writes, when you think you have been wronged, I'm in the Message translation, does it make any sense at all to go before a court that knows nothing of God's ways instead of a family of Christians? Paul is saying that there are two different ways to right wrongs. God's way of righting wrongs and the secular judicial way of righting wrongs. Now, thank God for the secular judicial way. But its goal is to assign blame, assign innocence, assign wrong, and then assign the remedy, usually in the form of some sort of punishment or fine. God's system has different goals. Those goals of God's are to take the parties that are at odds with one another and bring them together through three things, which are really one thing: forgiveness, making things right, and reconciliation, togetherness. So God's big goal is spelled out in brilliantly. I read this decades ago. Francis Schaeffer wrote a little book called The Mark of the Christian. I so highly recommend that you read it. In it, his contention is that Christians need to differ with one another differently from the way non-Christians differ from one another. In other words, Christians interacting with one another in today's world must be different from how the world interacts with each other on the internet, for example. And he cites Jesus' last prayer before he goes to the cross. And here's Jesus' prayer. I am praying not only for those of you who are my followers now, but I am praying also for those who will believe in me. That means he's praying for us. The goal is for all of them to become one in heart and mind. Just as you, Father, are in me, and I am in you, may they be one with us in heart and mind. Why? So that the world will believe that you, Father, have sent me. The degree to which the outside world sees Christians reconciling after differences is the degree to which people will see and believe in Christianity, believe in God, believe in Jesus. Conversely, Jesus is giving unbelievers the right to disbelieve in Christianity when they see Christians not being able to get along. The very first church I attended was a pretty big church, and within a year, the associate pastor, who was a charismatic, was either forced out or split off on his own from the senior pastor, who was a conservative. So here's the conservative leading the church, and here's the charismatic taking 100 of his followers out and starting a new church, and it became big. 2 new big churches. But there I was, a new Christian, thinking to myself, wow, I thought Christians were different. I thought Christians got along and liked each other. So that was a blow to my thinking about God. Second thing, the Apostle Paul says believers have the wisdom of God to be able to settle matters among themselves. Already in chapter 2, he said, you and I have the mind of Christ. We have among ourselves the resources to make things right. Here's what he says. The day is coming when the world is going to be judged by followers of Jesus. That's mind-blowing. Why, we are even going to judge angels. Even more mind-blowing. Without going into the whole thing, this means that humble, God-fearing, Holy Spirit-filled, cross-bearing believers will be God's partners in reigning over and ruling the new world, the new creation that will be in existence when heaven is brought by Jesus finally to earth, and there's a new creation. So he says, because of this, begin to act now like you will be acting then, with the wisdom you should be able to settle disputes now. Not in ways that assign blame. Blame separates. Not in accusations and counter-accusations. That doesn't bring reconciliation. Not in getting even. That doesn't achieve oneness. Not in settling the score, because that doesn't bring reconciliation or forgiveness or making things right. So, our big challenge is to practice living now as we will be living in the next life, to settle things among ourselves so that the world believes that God sent Jesus. To settle things among ourselves with the goal in mind of reconciliation, rectifying things, setting them right, and forgiveness. So, step number 1, Paul says, wouldn't it be far better just to let yourselves be wronged and forget it? Well, Paul is saying to a Christian, be willing to take up your cross. Be willing to pay the price to make things right. Even being willing to pay the price that somebody else, the person who wronged you perhaps, ought to be paying. That's a first step. There is always a price to be paid. An emotional price, a monetary price, a price of a difficult action to take, a relational price. There's a price to be paid. Remember this, as followers of Jesus, Jesus did not go down swinging. He went down paying the price that we ought to have paid. As followers of Jesus, that willingness needs to be our attitude as we look to rectify things. The second step is not mentioned here, but Paul mentions it many times elsewhere. And it goes beyond forgiving and forgetting. It is about making things right, which is the definition of justice. It's about justice, where the goal is reunion with Christ and reunion with each other, but that can't happen unless things are made right, unless they're fixed. That happens only at the foot of the cross, where the wronged and the wronger are in the same room, and it doesn't matter who initiates, but that they get there and begin at the foot of the cross to reconcile, to make things right. So the best example I know of that explains God's way of righting wrongs comes from the countries of South Africa and Rwanda in the 1990s. In South Africa, there was a system of apartheid. Separate blacks and whites were separated with very little contact with one another. But as you can imagine, the whites were on top and the blacks were on the bottom. And there were a lot of injustices, a tremendous amount of pain, lots of poverty, etc. Now, if you happen to be part of the white Afrikaners who have the prominent place in society, inadvertently or advertently, I don't know, you can easily see how you could be on the side of things that end up oppressive for and hurtful to the black community. So when apartheid came to an end, then there was a time you have to come together. Well, how do you do that? Well, I know that some on the white side came to the black representatives of the black part of the society, and they sort of asked for amnesty. We would like to be forgiven and set free from your claims of wrong against us. And we know there were many wrongs. But Nelson Mandela interjected and said, no, forgiveness is not enough. There needs also to be a way of setting things right. There needs to be justice. Who jumps in? But Anglican Archbishop Desmond Tutu sets up something called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where truth gets spoken. We all the parties would face up to the hurts and wrongs, and the ones who are wronged face up to their feelings. And there would be times when somebody who has committed a wrong would be face to face with the person who was wronged. And lots of tears, lots of anger, lots of frustration, desire for revenge, self-justification, all of the human things involved. But they would learn to listen, and they would learn to hear, and they would be able to, over time, with God's intervention, be able to say, yeah, I did that and I was wrong. Oh, yeah, I wanted to hurt you back. But then there might be tears, and then there might be reconciliation, and the desire to make things right. A wronger would be able to say, I now am going to pay the price to make things right. The person who's wronged now says, I am now willing to pay the price of forgiveness. And in paying that price, new starts have begun. The Father, and people who look at this, and people who've heard about this might think, this is nuts. How can you forgive that which was done to you? But others will say, wow, the Father has sent the Son. Can you imagine in Rwanda, where the Hutus, over 100 days, slaughtered 1 million Tutsis in 1994? Watch the Hotel Rwanda. And then, after that, to have a Hutu and a family member of a Tutsi who was slaughtered by this Hutu be able to come together, and this person in tears want to say, I'm going to make up for it. I'm going to make it right. I'm going to serve you. And this person saying in tears, I'll pay the price and forgive you, and even take this person under her wing. Amazing stories. That's God's way of making things right. Now, for us, for you and me in our personal lives, it's simple, but really, really hard. It's the willingness to make things right between you and another person from whom you are right now separated relationally. and perhaps in the presence of another, but at least be willing to come down and be in front of each other in the same room, telling the truth to each other with anger and tears and recognizing this may take months, years, decades, who knows, but the willingness to keep at it until this is able to occur. Jesus said, peacemakers are the ones who are the children of God. Being willing to pay the price for the wrong, whatever that price is. So, being willing to take up your cross in vulnerability, not to get even with one another, but to make things right in reconciliation and justice and forgiveness. The Apostle Paul writes another letter to the Corinthians, and he says this in chapter 7 of 2 Corinthians. Godly sorrow brings repentance, change of heart and change of mind, and readiness, willingness to make things right. Willingness, readiness to rectify things. Worldly sorrow brings death. In the Message translation, here's how it's worded. Distress that drives us to God turns us around. It gets us back in the way of salvation. We never regret that kind of pain. But those who let distress drive them away from God are full of regrets. And they end up on a deathbed of regrets. Is there a place in your life with another Christian where you're like this? That perhaps one of you could initiate coming together like this, so that, for the sake of Christ, so that the world can see that indeed Christ is the real thing. Let's continue to worship the Lord.
You shall cross the barren desert, but you shall not die of thirst. You shall wander far in safety, though you do not know the way. You shall speak your words in foreign lands, and all will understand. You shall see the face of God and live. Be not afraid. I go before you always. Come, follow me, and I will give you rest. Blessed are your poor, for the kingdom shall be theirs. Blessed are you that weep and mourn, for one day you shall laugh. And if wicked tongues insult and hate you, all because of me, blessed are you.
experiencing some sort of brokenness or distress, perhaps God's message to you today is to let that distress drive you to setting things right, making them right, doing what you can, as far as it depends on you, to make things right with this other person so that the world may know that the Father has sent the Son. God bless everybody. Have a great week. Bye-bye.